Kaapod, which has such an interesting story. So I'm so happy that she decided to tell her story about the Kaapod. We are recording this session, so please keep your questions till the very end so that we get the recording, in one go and it's not interrupted. That's it. Enjoy.
One of the reasons that is that the initiative that I'm going to talk about, that you've seen even in the creatives that we call SPOORTHI, has completed 9 years. It starts its 10th year. So the Kunbi Kaapod, as far as my involvement goes, is running into its 10th year. A second reason I wanted to talk about it is while the history of a textile is usually available, if you Google smartly enough, you will get the bare details that you need to know as a layperson. Very often what goes missing is the behind the scenes story of how certain textiles or certain initiatives came to be. So today the focus for me really is more about the initiative and how it came to be, rather than the textile itself. Of course, the textile is the core, but still I would like to focus on how the initiative came to be and speaking in a larger context of textile revivals in India, why this counts or does not count as a revival, what are the challenges when you work on textiles like these, are some of the things I want to talk about. And for that, there's just one single reason, is that I've been spoiled at Craft Circle in that it always manages to get you an audience that is actually very invested in learning. I think that's very important, that when we have a conversation, we are talking to the right kind of people, not talking to people who will doze off in 2 minutes and then forget everything you've told them and ask the same questions at the end. One is that I'm spoiled rotten by Craft Circle audiences, so it felt like the perfect place to share a story. And the second reason is that stories like the ones you hear are not something that you will find out there in the internet in a very comprehensive manner, for the single reason that the media never covers any of these. These are too small to be covered by media, and but they're very important as well. So I thought I would use the opportunity of the first Culture Club session today and plug in the SPOORTHI story, as I call it, which is why when she said we'll talk about the Kunbi Kaapod, I said no, talk about the SPOORTHI initiative, because that's the story I really want to talk about. For those of you not familiar with the textile at all, the Kaapod or the cloth of the Kunbis of Goa, the Kunbis are an agrarian community of farm labourers primarily, extends to a whole lot of indigenous communities that include the shepherds and the coolies as well. So the weaving community was of Goa was servicing these primary clientele. You had the Kunbi farm labor, you had the Dangards, the shepherds, and the Koli, who were the fisher folk. So these three streams of communities are their primary clients. The Kaapod itself comes under the category of indigenous textiles, by which we mean it is an umbrella term for textiles used by the original inhabitants of the region, or people who are local to that region and have been there for centuries. The Kaapod in its very raw form is the gamcha of the West Bengal and Bihar. It really is a very plain weave, checkered weave in bright reds and whites, sometimes other colors, but very basically it's just a small cloth that could range from being used as a napkin to a towel, and its very large version as a lugda, as a sari. Yeah, I'll come to the details of that. The Kaapod in its form as a kerchief or as a towel is a plain weave with no border, with nothing. It's the plain weave. And why this is important in indigenous communities is that in weaving, the plain fabric, checks and stripes are like the alphabets of weaving. That's the basic weaving skill that anyone starts with. You don't need very highly skilled people working on this. It's the basics, which means that anyone who is skilled enough to sit on a loom can weave these fabrics. It means that these are not labor intensive, these are not cost intensive, which means they are very affordable, they service a very large community. These are very, very simple weaves, and almost all indigenous communities you find in the country using either plain or checks and stripes. The ornamentation or the addition of motifs on the body or the pallu come with higher levels of skill. For instance, when I look at a Kanjivaram, you know that it requires a very high level of skill. A Banarsi requires a very high level of skill. Any form of ornamentation on the body requires a certain higher grade of skills from the weaver, making the fabric more expensive to make. Therefore, it changes the client who is going to buy that kind of a fabric. Now, if you look at the kapad, it really is probably just this part of it. When it becomes the lugda or the sari, you find that the dobby border comes into play. Yeah, and I've kept Rita Kapoor's iconic book open to the page on Goa, and I'd like to share this image. This is as it was photographed in the 80s. We believe that in Goa, weaving died out in the mid 80s completely, and I'll come to a bit on that. But if you look at this image here, you will see that that is the exact replica that you will see over there. That is the revival that we did, and this is what Rita Kapoor has photographed. Primary colors almost always red in indigenous communities for various reasons. Coming to Goa's history with weaving, as with every other part of the country, Goa's had its own traditional textiles that were being woven. Rita Kapoor does mention that there seems to have been migration of weavers from Udupi towards Goa. We also find a similar migration towards Maharashtra. So, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka have this triangle of migration happening. You find the design influence existing even today in Maharashtra and Goa of the Karnataka design language and technique. As with all things that happened in the country when colonial powers came in, and especially in the case of Goa, when the Portuguese came in, it was with the intent to convert. The intent was very clear. It was not to govern as much as to convert. Yeah. Part of that mandated that people living under Portuguese rule could no longer wear their own traditional textiles. They had to convert to European garments. What we then see in the intervening 150 years leading to Goa's independence movement is that weaving of the kapad actually went underground, because there was a ban on weaving in the state of Goa, which is ruled by the Portuguese. Weaving went underground. It became an act of rebellion to weave indigenous clothes. And this rebellion continued all the way up to when Goa got its independence in the 60s. And by the 80s, you find that weaving has completely died out. The upper strata of Goa had already converted to wearing Western clothes. A lot of them, even as we speak today, chose to be Portuguese citizens giving up Indian citizenship, which meant giving up the traditional ways of clothing and attire. But this is still a minority. You have a large section of labor that was still wearing some form of traditional clothing. For instance, if you look at the Kunbis, the Hindu Kunbis and the Christian Kunbis draped the lugda differently. The Christians would pair it with a blouse and the Hindus would wear it like a halter. If you go to Mapsa market on a Sunday morning, if you are lucky, you will still see a couple of them wearing the kapad in the traditional way. A little bit on textiles that act as instruments or tools of rebellion. We've often seen that when a textile is used as an act of rebellion or as a symbol of struggle for freedom, Once freedom is achieved, it dies a natural death. We've seen it in India through Khadi. Khadi, which sort of revolutionized the entire freedom movement, once the purpose is served, the utility of the fabric dies out, which is unfortunate, but that's how things work. So Khadi in India, pan India, finds a slow death after independence is served, because it's a new country, new aspirations, therefore your outward symbols are going to be very new, that for you symbolize progress, modernity and looking ahead in some sense of the term. Probably very identifiable in a city like Bombay, where we gave up traditional hand-woven clothes to wear mill-made clothes, as did the rest of the country when we became independent, because that is what modernism was all about. Being contemporary, being modern, being progressive was all about at that point in time, and now we see that the cycle is coming back. And I will talk a little about how I got involved with this Kaapod, because I am not a Goan, I am not a Maharashtrian. My roots lie in Andhra and Karnataka, domiciled in Maharashtra for quarter century. So I suppose in some form I am Maharashtrian as well. But it started very funnily, because my son was actually obsessed with holidays in Goa during Christmas. So there was this compulsion to drive down to Goa every single Christmas vacation and just sit there on the beach doing nothing, and after a point it really weighed me down, because there's just this much you can take off the beach and the shack and not doing anything else, because there was really nothing else he'd want to do. You just go sit there, come back, and it can get very boring for someone like me. And that's when I started reading up, I somehow was puzzled by the fact that Goa was the only state in the country which had no textile development policy of its own. There was no textile development policy of its own, and as a tourist it bothered me that there wasn't anything I could buy that was traditionally Goan in terms of textiles. I didn't want the coconut shells, I didn't want any of that. I wanted fabric and I was not getting it, and I was very puzzled as like, what were people in Goa wearing before the Portuguese came? Surely they were wearing something. So what was that something? And that's the rabbit hole I went down to. And of course, Rita Kapoor comes to your rescue, but you don't have a place in Goa where you can actually go in back then and say, you know, I want to buy a Kunbi Kaapod. No one actually knew what it was. So I couldn't find it in any of the stores in Goa, or a lot of people didn't know what it was about. And at this point in time, I'll step back a little to 2014. The 100 Sari Pact was in full swing. You know, everyone who had ever seen a sari was part of the 100 Sari Pact. You wore 100 saris in a particular time period or whatever it was. I was not part of the pact, but what the pact did was that it gave birth to a lot of Facebook groups that centered around wearing saris and wearing handlooms. So there was one such Facebook group called Kaitari, which means handloom in Tamil, which was talking about bringing back handlooms into fashion. Sari well and good, but handlooms basically. And it was on this Facebook group that I got an opportunity to work on a market revival project for the Udupi saris. It was a very simple issue. The cooperative society had 135 saris in stock. No one was buying them. So the weavers were sitting by the bus stand at Udupi and selling each sari for 100 rupees. The sari originally was around 500. And someone posted about it, a friend posted about it on the Facebook group. And at that point, I remember thinking that there are 10,000 women on this Facebook group, and not one of them is coming up with a solid idea on how do we actually sell these 135 saris. And I come from a background with marketing and business analysis, so you know, your mind sort of is trained to think along those lines. I said, let's float a Google form. Whoever wants to buy will pick it up, will pay 750 rupees, which includes 500 for the weaver, plus shipping, packing charges, whatever. I just sort of did the back end work in terms of organizing the logistics of getting the saris from Udupi to whoever wanted it. and making sure that the payments were taken care of really. And the 135 sarees got sold out, I think, in about 2 or 3 days. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why this is important, because this was not a textile revival. I will not call it a textile revival because there was no intervention with design, color, nothing. आपके पास stock है, I'm helping you sell it. Yeah. So the idea was to just get rid of that 135, 145 sarees that were there. Just help them sell it. But what it did for them is that it gave cash in their hand, which meant they went back, repaid the debt and picked up more yarn, because they assumed there's a demand coming up from here suddenly, and they started weaving again. Very simple basic sarees even then. It was just this without the dobby border. The Udupi sarees, for those of you who've seen Malgudi days, the leads were Udupi cottons. So it's just a very simple saree that didn't need you to have a fall, matching blouse, petticoat, none of the tam jam. You dress it up, dress it down, do what you want with it, and you're set to go. So for a working woman who was spending say 2,500–3,000 on a saree, suddenly she can get 4 sarees in that price that don't need her to spend on accessorizing it. So a lot of women who were working with a budget actually found it very affordable to buy. Then obviously things got a little out of hand, because suddenly I was staring at an order value of like 500 sarees, 700 sarees, and I don't come from a background where I can sell sarees. So I said, now let's do B2B. I said, all the people who want to buy 10 sarees and above, this is the person you contact, please go buy. What that did is small home-based entrepreneurs started picking up the Udupi sarees and working on it with mirror work, embroidery, whatever they wanted to do, marking up the price and selling it, and that freed me to go down the rabbit hole that was the Kaapod of Goa. I remember that I was quite obsessed with this. Obsessed enough that when I couldn't get it anywhere, I said, I'll pick up Wendel's version of the Kunbi and I'll search for 1 more year. If I don't get it, then this is the Kunbi and I'm happy with it. This didn't make me completely happy because it looked nothing like what I had seen. But this is Wendel's version of the Kunbi on a white warp, woven by a master weaver in Goa. Yeah. This was 7,500. It went to the Lakme Fashion Week. He put the Kunbi on the map, the textile map. So huge gratitude to Wendel for putting it on the map and having the name on everyone's mind. The obsession was bad enough for me to do a trip, road trip to Goa during the Diwali vacation, where I had a little card, a visiting card made with that picture on it and my number at the back, and we drove down lanes and villages handing out cards to people who were willing to listen, saying, if you find this sari, can you please call me on this number. That's how bad the obsession was. And please remember, all this is just so I could get one. I was not looking at a business, I was not looking at anything. It's just that how is there a state in the country with no textile of its own? Why? Where did it go? So my promise to my family, that's my husband and son, was that if I don't get it on this trip, then I don't talk about it again. Yeah. And we were on our way back when I got a call from this lady, and she said, are you the one who's looking for this thing, because I have woven these. And it turned out that she lived, it's like sometimes things are right in front of you and you don't look, and she was in Panaji. She was a professor at the Goa Home Science College, and as part of a project that they were doing, they had set up looms in their textile department, and they had actually got a weaver to weave the traditional Kunbi lugda. Yeah. And they had also done a contemporary version that used the color palette of the original Kunbi, but not in that design, which is what I am wearing today. It has no dobby border, it has nothing, but this was just for textile design students to sort of play around and make. And she said, look, I can make these for you because the weavers are there in Karnataka and I can make these. but I can't make one obviously. She said, you know, we need a minimum order of at least 50 saris, which is the warp size in Karnataka. In that part of North Karnataka, one warp is 50 saris. A warp is one batch literally, 50. 30 to 50 would be North Karnataka because each sari is not very expensive. Say in a case of a Kanjivaram, it would be 6 saris, 4 to 6 saris. The more expensive the sari, the smaller the warp. Yeah, just a thumb rule. She said, I will need about 50 saris order, and then I'm like, okay, we don't have 50 people, you know, and that's when the calls went out to mom, her sisters. Luckily, we're a very large family and we're very dominated by girls. So it was like, my mom was like, okay, like every cousin is going to get one kind of a thing. So we solved about 26 saris, and I went back to the founder of Kaitari, absolutely wonderful person called Sumita Pai, and I said, look, this is what it is. She said, so I'll also take one and we'll sort of talk to friends and we'll do. And she said, but why don't we ask on Kaitari again, you know, we'll ask. It's her group after all, you know, and so I worked out a Google form, and we said we'll give 2 days, a lot of time, that is, we'll give people 2 days and we'll say, okay, this is what it's going to cost and this is the timeline we're looking at. So 50 saris, we were told, will take 6 months to make. Yeah, because you have to create the entire unit, you need to dedicate the loom, you have to create the dobby. It's a lot of work. Pre-loom processes are long. So 6 months for 50 saris was the thing. The saris were priced at 1850 and 1950 plus shipping. All this with no money in hand. There's nothing. There's no money to invest. We don't have any angel investor, no willing husband, no nothing, not enough savings also to put because we have no clue. And Sumita says, what are we doing? How are we funding this thing? And if there's one thing I have is confidence in cooking up things as I go along when I'm in a crisis. My attitude is, let's do this and then we'll work it out. Something will come up anyway. I said, let's crowd fund this. We'll take 50% advance and then when we're delivering the sari, we will take the remainder. So everyone is safe, you know. In my head, that was a solid plan. It turned out 2 days later when we closed the form and, you know, we looked at it, 245 other people thought it was a solid idea as well. Now the problem is we wanted 50 saris order, we got 245. So we went back and we told Suvarna Gauri of Goa Home Science College, we need 245 saris. She said, we don't have weavers. She said, now I have to go to North Karnataka and find weavers because this is going to take a long time. We've never done such a large order, you know, 50 itself is like bulk. She went back, convinced weavers, so we got about half a dozen weavers on board, and by some act of immense collective foolishness and bravado, this got rolling. People actually put in that 50% advance. We paid the weavers there, and Gauri was coordinating on the ground. She was the technical expert. She was also doing the, you know, travel between Panji and North Karnataka and checking on the weavers, getting things done. And that's when the world opens up and says, you know, this is not going to be simple. This is going to be riddled with as many obstacles as life can possibly throw at you. 6 months ticked by, 9 months have ticked by, and the first sari has not come off the loom. Eventually, I think we were closer to the 11-month mark when the first sari came off the loom, and that is this piece. Wow. Yeah, this piece that you see here. And at that point, when this reached home, I said, can I just close this now? Like, I got my Kaapod now, can I just say goodbye? But anyway, we offered 2 variants. This was one of the designs we gave, and this piece was on offer, and a third variant we were offering was this particular one. Yeah. So these 3 came on board, and somehow at the 18-month, 19-month mark, we were actually able to say that we can start delivery of these saris. Considering that I work on, you know, this very non-business, non-professional way of doing this entire thing, we realized that we needed to ship these from a particular location because the weavers weren't going to do it. Gauri was obviously not going to do it, so it had to be me. So every Kunbi sari in the world at that point landed up at my house, and we had a whole team of volunteers sitting and parceling these, writing addresses, sending them out. Volunteers included the driver, the maid, the husband, the kid, and people from Kaitari who lived in Bombay. A lot of people actually out there. What had happened in the interim was that I was working on a project with some artists. I was exploring the possibility, and I was in North Karnataka, and we went to this weaver's house, and he would not, he said come in, and the room was rather dimly lit and whatever, and I looked at the cupboard and I recognized the saris inside because they were the Kunbi Kaapod. So I asked him, he said, no, I want that sari. He said, oh, that I can't sell to you. I said, I'm willing to pay over and above whatever you're getting for that. He said, no, I can't because it's all going to Bombay. And then he tells me, he said, that was when demonetization had also happened, and Gauri was managing finances very, very well, luckily for us. She kept the income stream very steadily going for the weavers. He said, this is what has sustained us through that time when we did not have cash. So there's a certain loyalty. I will not sell this to anyone but that lady in Bombay. And I opened his order book, and the shipping address was mine, So that entire, it was really sweet. It was really sweet because I did get to see the Kunbi Kaapod on the warp. I saw the defective pieces piled up, and I saw the order book. So I knew that, okay, these guys are actually not siphoning off along the way and selling it anywhere because they were very committed. It's only after I got all that information out that I told him that I am that person in Bombay you're shipping this to, Really sweet. Somehow reinstated my faith in the weavers because I'd never ever worked with weavers directly before. Even now I was not working with weavers directly. The sari had come, and there was a little launch party and a little celebration of that. Very, very sweet moments in a crowd-funded journey that was completely new to India's revival landscape. It was much, much later when I sat down, when I exited the project, and when I sat down and put my thoughts together, that I realized somehow, despite all the bungling and the lack of professionalism that we did during the initiative, we somehow successfully pulled off India's first crowd-funded private textile and market revival project. Wow. Because this project, when I exited this was 2016, and I actively stopped being part of it around end 2018, beginning 2019, we had done about 3,000 saris. Wow. Yeah, and it continues to roll out even today on its own. I'm not saying this is a smooth journey. It's been anything but smooth. Looking back, I think it's one of the toughest things I have done. Continues to be very tough. There have been moments of great insights, and those have not come from me. I don't come from a textile background, so it was very important that I had to be very, very open to learning from whoever was willing to teach me. So what is a reed, what is a pick, what is dobby, what is jacquard, understand the loom came from Gauri, who was, I think, brilliant. I worked with her on another project later, and she continues to be a rock solid support. It came from people like Sumita Pai and Banita Leong of Kaitari, who I think just gave that complete freedom and trust and said, look, we trust you on this, so run with it. This was at IIM Indore, and we were the only ones who were pitching on textiles. We presented the case study, and I think that was an eye-opener because I realized that was home. I was not interested in the textile technique and the technicalities of the textile revival as much as I was about what is the impact of doing something like this. Sometimes it takes someone else to tell you that this is what you are looking for, you know. And the textile landscape is a very complex, conflicting, competitive landscape, especially when you are reviving something. The whole focus is on textile revival, and I have always found myself asking, who are we reviving this for? And why are we doing it? What is the impact? And how long is this thing going to have a run for? And while I could not articulate it in my initial days, I realized writing the chapter for that book actually put things into perspective for me, that this is what you're actually interested in. And that has been my core ever since, that I've always looked at a textile from what can it do for the market and who is my market fundamentally. That happened. We had some stunning women who championed the cause of the Kunbi Kaapod. These are not women who are high flyers or page 3 or socialites. These are everyday women who sort of took ownership of the textile itself and its story, and sort of wore it with a badge of honor and carried the story forward. One of them is Sharvari Khatavkar. I think brilliant in terms of what she did for the Kunbi Kaapod, in terms of how well she wore it, the numerous ways in which she draped it. She's also the one who introduced me to Babu Rao Tilve, or Tilve Kaka as he's called, from Pedne village, one of the last weavers of Goa. Sharvari had visited him earlier, and we visited Tilve Kaka after the first saris came off the loom. I remember he was very reluctant to meet us because he had his own trials and tribulations with weaving. He was, at that time, he was recovering from a paralytic stroke, so his movement waist down was a bit restricted, but his dead looms were still part of his compound. And his daughter-in-law, I remember saying, just look at what they're wearing, and something probably appealed to him in what he saw, that he actually not only had a very long conversation with us, which we have parts of it on record, but valuable insights into how a weaver thinks. And I'll share a little bit of what I have learned thanks to those conversations, some directly, some indirectly. But a huge thing from Tilve Kaka was that he gave us kaapod that he had woven. That was very old, and those were probably the last of his samples. These were without the dobby border, just the gamchas and the towels that he had woven. Some of those textiles are with me, so I think that's a very precious thing to receive from someone who's so closely associated with the weaving history of Goa. The sari that you see here, as well as this one, are based on Tilve Kaka's vintage samples. The sari that you see here is from the other weaver, Kamath. This is from his vintage collection. I mean, his sample, this has been taken from him. A little bit about the use of colors, because a conversation on indigenous textiles cannot be without talking about the colors. World over, we see indigenous communities that live off the land will use red and shades of it in their textile as the base color. This is true of whether it's Odisha, whether it's Bengal, whether it's Karnataka, Maharashtra, Goa, anywhere. Red would be a color of associated with communities that live off the land or live off agriculture. Red symbolizes fertility. Red symbolizes feminine energy. Red is also a very practical color for women to work in the fields, especially in a country, in a land like Goa where it's red earth. When you wear a color like this, the mud stains don't show. It's a very practical color to work with, really. At the bottom, whatever symbolism we may give it, this is a very practical color to give. And if you leaf through the pictures, you will see that the lugda was not this long. Some communities, depending on where they worked on land and how they stacked up in the socio-economic order, the length would vary. This is true even of other communities as well, like the East Indians of Bombay or anyone else. They would wear it up to the knee. If you are working in the paddy fields, you are going to be knee deep in water. So, it made sense that whatever textile you were draping ended at the knee. It would end at the knee, so it was a shorter width, shorter length, hitched like this. It's a sort of halter neck kind of a drape that you had, and the Christian communities later started wearing it with a blouse, a floral printed blouse. The Hindus would not wear one. Later on, you do find that there are 7.5 meter lugdas also worn that go all the way to the ankle. Now, typically we find as a thumb rule, communities that work in hard physical labor, the women will wear shorter draping styles. Where women do not have to get their hands dirty or work in soil very actively for prolonged periods of time, and the family is slightly affluent, where they are not farm labor but they are farm owners, you find that the drape goes to the ankle or just below the ankle. If you look at the Brahmin communities, it always is below the ankle, because the ankle should not show. You do not show the ankle to anyone. So, Brahmin communities, you find whatever draping style they use, whether it is a Navari or if it is the 7-yard as it is in Andhra or the Madisa or anywhere, you will find that the ankle tends to be covered on a, if it is a normal thing. You go higher up the order, like the Peshwas, it goes even below that to the heel. If you go up to the royalty, you have it going below that. You also have an extra shalu to drape, and you have a large trailing pallu and pleats at the back, because your affordability goes up. These are just thumb rules. There are no, there will be exceptions as there are, but typically this is what we find, that the more affluent your community is, the more amount of cloth, the more expensive cloth you can afford. So, you will find coarse cotton at the bottom, which is why we say khadi kitna coarse hai, so we do not tend to go for it. You know, you want muslins at the top, coarse cotton stays at the bottom, silks go right at the top, brocades go at the top, plain weaves like these come at the bottom. Interesting insights like these came in from various sources. One of them, some of the insights included coming from the Goans themselves. When I was looking at the analysis of who bought the Kunbi Kaapod, the Goans were last. The Goans were last. They were the ones who were not placing orders for the Kaapod. The reason for this was that every indigenous textile comes with a caste and class connotation. You cannot shake it off, period. You cannot. Much as we would like to speak in very secular democratic terms, this is unavoidable even in today's India. The red Kaapod, the red lugda, usually worn by married women. The blue, worn by someone who's widowed recently. Same for the East Indian community as well. You will find that this red one has a set of colors on it, red base with white, yellow, green and blue. Yeah. Typically we say these symbolize the 5 elements. Red is the soil or the feminine energy, whichever way you want to take it. Blue is water, green is crops, yellow is family, white is peace. One way of looking at how indigenous communities look at these colors is that they believe that if the woman is the foundation of the social structure, everything falls in place very well. So, outside elements will not be in conflict with the existing social order. Probably, and this is only guesswork because we have very, very inadequate information, This is a nod to the original matriarchal systems that agrarian communities would follow. Even today, if you go to rural India and go to agrarian communities, the woman rules the house. It's the woman who runs the household. She calls the shots on how the finance is managed, how is the grain managed, who is getting what, how is the staff managed. She is running the entire show. The men are putting in the labor. The woman is running the show. Probably a nod to that. I have no idea, but this is just how it works. But what was interesting is that when the Kunbi came in, I found people pairing it with all colors of blouses, including her. She's wearing it with a mustard blouse, and it just goes well. It just goes well. You can wear just about any color with this, and it just feels like, oh, it's made for each other. Yeah. It's just a very interesting way of looking at design, looking at the way textiles are designed. You look at shorter lengths, shorter draping styles. You look at how textiles were designed with the customer as the focus, not the other way around. Today, textiles are designed and then the customer finds their way through that maze. Earlier, the customer was there and you designed exactly what they needed. It was bespoke at its best. Newly widowed lady would wear this. You notice that it's not a red border, unlike that. This has a purple border. Purple is usually symbolic of two things. One, a very evolved spiritual being or royalty. Royalty usually wore purple. Yeah, so you find that a newly widowed woman in those days would have a blue lugra with a purple border, and you'll find that yellow, red, green have disappeared from this. Only the white has remained. The materialistic elements have been removed from the body. It's just plain white checks now. Yeah. Someone who's been widowed for longer than 5 years or 10 years or is very old would wear a purple, and the red border would make a comeback. But the purple body is plain because this is the highest level of detachment. This is the highest level of detachment. Now the cycle is sort of complete that the red body comes back here and then goes back into that. There's a complete life cycle of a woman and her socio-economic status in a textile. These are all cotton, indicating of course that the socio-economic status of the wearer could not have been very high. These are not very affluent people. But if you bring these same things to the East Indian community of Bombay, you will find samples in cotton, silk cotton as well as silk, indicating the relative affluence of the community. Because in Bombay, they were not farm laborers, they were farm owners. There's a difference. They were not just farm owners, they later gave up their land to work under the East India Company, therefore the Bombay East Indians. Therefore the affordability to look different from those not as wealthy. Therefore you will find silk cotton coming in, you will find the silk versions coming in for their wedding sari as well as the color green. A nod to the Maharashtrian traditions that are followed, where green is a color that Maharashtra's textiles are very, very root bound to. This is a bit about the colors of the Kunbi Kaapod. I'll get back to a little about the initiative. Things I did wrong, I'd like to put them on record here. I think I got too rash. I think 245 orders for someone who was not into selling textiles was big, and to do it alone was, I think, was a bigger mistake now when I look back at it. The doing it alone happened because we worked with someone who had a store in Bangalore for the Udupi project, and it was very easy because he had everything organized. He had the logistics in place, he had the bank accounts needed, he had the bill books, he had the ability to ship it out. He was already built for all of that. But what happened during that project was that, as things always happen, people started saying, oh, is he making money off it? Why is he making 50 bucks on each sari? Oh, but why is he being favored? Why isn't someone else doing it? And somewhere we took a call that if we are doing the Kunbi Kaapod, we can't risk this kind of allegation coming in that someone is making money off, because this is supposed to be a zero profit initiative. Yeah. So at 1850 and 1950, with I think 1800, 1900 going for weaving, there was really very little money to make, but we were taking no chances because that would sort of scar all of us for life, I think. So we decided on this brilliant idea of let's do it solo. Let's not rely, we won't give people the opportunity to say, why are you favoring him? Why aren't you giving it to someone else to do? Bad idea, I suppose, in hindsight, but that's what it was. It was crazy because I'm not a numbers person at all. I'm not a numbers person. I only know there's an income coming in and that it has to be spent. Yeah, it continues even today. So it's really, really bad. I'm a humanities student. So you know where I'm coming from. I don't, like, I think I left maths. The last math I did was in grade 10. Yeah, and after that Microsoft Excel was doing everything for me. You know, and I was working for a corporate. So there were a whole load of accountants to do all that dredge work for me. I only had to analyze. I didn't have to do anything else. And very bad idea for a humanities student to look at accounts, really. And for someone who is in marketing and business analysis to do sales, because sales is a very different ball game. Sales means you have to be there every single day telling people what a wonderful idea it is to buy this sari which 2,999 other people also have. My single biggest achievement probably is getting 3,000 women to buy the exact same color and design. Women don't do that. If anything, I think that's the only achievement I really have, is that I got women hooked onto paying for and waiting for 18 months, 24 months to get the sari that 1,000 others already had. There was no change in design, no change in color, nothing. Only this. We have only this. Please take only this. घूम फिर के तुमको यही लेना है. And women waited. Women waited. So that was probably the only good thing that happened. But this is also the only sari that my husband unfailingly recognizes correctly. Because he'd seen so much of it at home. He had seen so much of it at home that if he saw someone wearing it on the road, he would point out correctly and say, that is a Kunbi Kaapod. Because we've seen so much of it for 3 years at home, you know. 2016 to 2019, all my house saw was these red saris. And because my driver was in charge of ferrying these to the courier service and back, I became the lady who has red saris. And the courier guys, once I exited the project, he was actually saying, वो लाल वाली साड़ी अभी नहीं बिक रही है क्या? Like, you know, because they got so curious, what is this thing that is going out? Like, no color change, no design change, like, लगातार 3 साल से, like, you are sending the same damn thing out. Yeah, what is this thing, like, you know? So I actually took a little class for even the courier guys. So they all know the story of, you know, the Kunbi Kaapod and why it is what it is. But yeah, a lot of mistakes, I think, because of handling it alone, is that you don't get credit for any of the work that you do. Yeah, that is a given. But what you will get are the brickbats, because you are going to offend 10 people definitely. If you appease one, you're offending 10 is the rule I have found out. Having been at the receiving end, I think that's the general rule, that if one person says something nice, there'll be 10 who will say, but this, yeah. So obviously I have trod on a lot of toes, I have stepped on a lot of feet, and that has reflected somewhere in the communication that has come back. I can't do anything about it though. I can't do anything about it. But for anyone who wants to try something as foolhardy as this, my one advice is that you need a whole crew of insane women around you who will go beyond just packing and sending things off, who want to stand by you and say, you know, we with you on this, like, you know, we're going to tell you you're an idiot before you get to hear of it from the others. I didn't have that crew back then, though I wish I did. You know, you need someone who's going to look at you and say, you know, you're flying way too high with this idea. You know, what are you smoking when you're doing this? You need people around you who can tell you that, not people who can tell you what an awesome job, because then you're going to get carried away thinking you're doing an awesome job. I wish I had more insane women around me. I truly, truly wish that had happened, because at least I think that would have sort of sobered me up a bit on that front. But it was very exciting because we got zero media attention. In a way, that was a blessing, because you could fly under the radar, not have any celebrity talking about what you're doing, but have some 3,000 women posting pictures in their Kunbi Kaapod, which fueled more demand, which continues 9 years down the line. So much so that cities like Bombay, Bangalore all had special photo shoots with the Udupi and the Kunbi Kaapod. Like, women wore their Kunbi Kaapods in whatever color they had. They were there at the national park doing beautiful photo shoots, some 50 women at a time, in Bangalore's Lal Bagh and Cubbon Park, and where have you, in Hyderabad at you know, the Qutub Shahi tombs and the Charminar and Chow Mahalla. You had women wearing these very everyday saris that no one would give a second glance at. I think that is the most powerful thing that happened. The Udupi initiative was called Spandana. Spandana means a nourishing touch. And I thought SPOORTHI, which means inspiration, would be the right name for this. And somewhere I think what happened on the ground reflected the names that gave. That every time a woman wore a Kunbi Kaapod, she took complete ownership of the entire textile and the story of how it came to be. Because somewhere what we had created without intending to was thousands of stakeholders. Everyone who gave 50% advance had their eye on what you're doing. And there was somewhere when you got your piece, it felt like, oh my God, like I did not wait 1.5 years to get a Patan Patola. It is to get a Kunbi Kaapod. Who would have thought? Right? I think that's where the story really still gains traction today. I exited the project, like I said, late 2018, early 2019, because I had found where my, not calling really, but I got my Kunbi Kaapod. Can we get to the next textile that I don't have, please? So, and there were people who were taking the torch and carrying it forward. Gauri Galgali had her own business, and she still continues to work with the Kunbi Kaapod, continues to work in Goa, continues to work in Karnataka, sorry, have them woven in thing. What had happened in the middle was someone who had a lot of contacts gave me the contact of someone in the department of handicrafts in Goa, and said, why don't you go talk to them, and you know, why don't we have the Kunbi being sold at the Goa outlets and whatever. And me being me, I thought that's a very stupid thing to do. I went to them with a pitch that why don't you all restart weaving in Goa. Goa actually had a few looms where they train women to weave. They do these kesh carpets, what is called kesh in Bengal. They weave those carpets, and there's some vocational training that is given to them on the looms. That's a certificate course. So in my head, after having listened to so many professors and MBA and academicians, I said that's a great idea, because if we restart weaving in Goa, people will get an additional source of livelihood. The Kunbi will be woven where it belongs, and the Goa government will actually be able to put the Kunbi Kaapod in their, you know, sort of emporiums. They thought it was a bad idea. I thought it was a brilliant idea. They thought it was a bad idea. And I said, okay, I'm not interested in sitting and selling saris for the rest of my life. And I just exited, because I said, if the government doesn't want to take it up, then I'm not pushing for anything. I just needed to let go, and I was hoping that the government would take it off my hands. Turns out they were not interested either. But later, when this whole thing gained traction, there were a lot of people working simultaneously on the Kunbi Kaapod. People from Goa themselves, Rohit Falgaonkar was one of them, who was working on the Kaapod as well. All of these initiatives, Wendell, SPOORTHI, Rohit Falgaonkar, there was just so much conversation on social media, good, bad, ugly, that somehow the textile started getting the spotlight it deserved. And the government actually gave, I think, if I'm not wrong, a 5 crore grant to set up looms and to start training weavers in Goa. And I think post-COVID, sorry, they applied for a GI tag, which means we now have a government that has the full intent of reclaiming a textile that went missing in 1984 after a 40-year, 50-year gap, 40-year gap really. That is going to work wonders if it happens. I know weaving has started in Goa. They don't do the dobby, they do the gamcha kind of kaapod. There are a lot of people working on the ground right now. You have Poonam Pandit working with Tilve Kaka's son. You have, I don't know if Rohit Falgaonkar, who's actually a historian, I don't know if he's still working on the kaapod. I know Gauri continues to work with the kaapod, but she does it in Karnataka because the dobby is done only in Karnataka. And there's another reason why it's easier to do it in Karnataka. It's because the design language originally comes from there. If the weavers have migrated from Karnataka, the DNA still carries the design language. This is the design language of North Karnataka. This is the design language you'll also find in the East Indian Christian community of Bombay as well. So, this particular border that you see is unique to the kaapod. It's a 4-petal flower. You can scroll through the book. Rita actually lists out the different kinds of designs they've used. Some of them you will find, in fact all of them you will find in North Karnataka textile borders as well. A variation of this with more petals is called a Gayatri border in Karnataka. The Gayatri itself is a variation of the Rudraksh motif. So, it's about how designs actually are adapted based on who the customer is. For instance, if you go to North Karnataka, you can look at the border of the sari and identify who the customer is going to be. So, if we see a Gayatri border, we know it's coming to Karnataka. If it's a Chiki Paras border, we know it's going to Maharashtra. If it's an Indori, we know it's a Maheshwari with a specific kind of flower border intended for Maharashtra, mainly Pune. The Brahmin communities of Bombay, Pune would wear the Induri. So, a lot of designs are very, very customer specific without intending to be. It's sort of trying to create a unique identity for that community that you end up creating a design that gets associated with them. Like a variation of this comes as the komdichi pie for the Bombay East Indians, feet of the chicken. Yeah, it's the same. The Rudraksh becomes the Gayatri, Gayatri becomes this Aboli Phool for Goa, which becomes komdichi pie for Bombay East Indians. Variations of the same motif. And Jerry Pinto had picked up a few, and we had a lot of people who came back and said, oh, this reminds me of what my grandmother used to wear, or I've seen the elders in our family wear these saris and we don't have them anymore. And we had people picking up the saris for nostalgia's sake. And having said that, I'm not really sure how many Goans are actually invested in buying a textile that outsiders feel is a traditional textile and should belong to Goa. I'm not really sure even today. I hope it becomes a matter of pride, but at this point I'm not very sure because I've been a little away from the project. But I do know that a lot of non-Goans wear it, they buy it, even if they don't know the entire story. I hope they're buying it for the reasons that it's a well designed, well made piece, and when they actually find out, I hope it adds value to the sari. You know, sometimes this is the biggest takeaway I have, which I tried rectifying in my next project which I worked, is that it's after speaking to the likes of Ratna Pathak and Jerry Pinto and all of them, and even Jerry Pinto was saying, he says, you know, there are still some issues around caste and class and who can wear and who can't wear. So, you know, I'm going to be hesitant about who I'm going to gift these to. You know, I'll have to be careful with that. Somewhere I felt, have I appropriated the Kaapod? That's when I started thinking, you know, for whom did we make the textile and why? Realizing that the people who actually owned the textile, which is the Kunbi farm labor who still live in Mapsa and all of those places, don't have access to the Kaapod in this avatar. We somehow, I think, and this is purely personal, I think we appropriated it and made it ours. And by making it ours, we distanced them from it. We made it something that urban elite would wear. You know, we would style it differently, we would wear it differently, and we would take the story away and just give a very beautiful sari to people. And for those who knew me, they would get the story as well. But somewhere again, I kept getting back to the feeling that the owners of the textile no longer have access to it. What they wear today is a 500 rupee powerloom that you can get at Mapsa and Mazgaon market, Margaon markets. You don't have a handloom for them. And somehow that has stayed as a peg in my head for the longest time. That while the revival was a success in terms of more people got to know about it, there are weavers who have benefited from it, there are entrepreneurs who sell this and make, you know, a fair earning out of it. There's more conversation around the Kunbi, there is weaving coming back to Goa. All that is great, but I can't shake off the fact that the people who actually originally wore this no longer have access. We've removed that access somehow. When I got the opportunity to work on traditional textiles of the East Indian community of Bombay, that is something I have gone all out to address. That the community that the textile belongs to cannot be alienated from that textile. So when I worked on the Lugra of the East Indian community of Bombay, I made it a point that we will have to get East Indians of Bombay buying it first. If they are not buying it, then it does not matter what it is. It's just another pretty sari that we are making. The backstory will be forgotten in a few years because, like I said, no media is going to tell the story. So it's going to be off digital memory and therefore everyone's memory in a few years. It's not going to be recorded anyway. So that's a mistake I've consciously tried to correct when I worked with the traditional textiles of the Bombay East Indians. And I think this is something we really, people like me who work as researchers and chroniclers need to keep an eye out for, that when we are talking of community specific textiles, we need to be very clear with intent, impact and integrity. You know, these three have to be tied in. If I'm going to take a textile from, say, a Adivasi community of Odisha and turn it into something else completely different, then I need to be very clear about my intent, what is my impact and how honest am I going to be with this. You know, then I have not revived the textile in its original form. I've recreated an adaptation of an indigenous textile. It's a lot of English words packed in, but that's the most honest way I can put it in. Because it's really not that. Like, this is not a Kunbi Kaapod. This is not a Kunbi Kaapod. This is simply a sari that uses the design palette or the color palette of the Kunbi Kaapod. It's a very contemporary one. It just uses stripes and checks. It's just another sari, uses that color palette, that's it. This is not a Kunbi Kaapod. I'll be very clear about that. So, these are my key takeaways, and for those who follow my work, I think I've really learned from those mistakes. I've taken my time from 2019 to 2021, 2022 before I took up my next project with the Sonkari Lugra, and I was very particular and conscious of the fact that as someone who's not into reviving textiles, who's not a textile revivalist, I'm not going to poke my nose and look for the next textile that needs to be rescued. It needs to come, the demand has to come from within, and this time it came from within the East Indian community, and that will be not something that's out there being created in the thousands. It's going to stay small, it's just going to stay sustainable hopefully, and not have a lot of the marketing glitz that this had by virtue of being done on a Facebook group. It won't have that marketing drama that this had. The drama continues though for the Kunbi Kaapod. I may have exited the project hasn't exited. For a lot of people, for good, bad and ugly, more bad and ugly, it's my name and face associated with it. So, whenever you want to diss, there's a face there, and that's mine. Yeah, I'm being very honest. I'm really being very honest in this. I'm sure everyone has their reasons on why I should have worked, why I should not have worked. One of the reasons I was told is you are not going, so you have no business doing it. And I was extremely puzzled because I had a Maharashtrian reviving a Gadwal, and I was like, how is that possible then? Then you're asking yourself, then how is someone sitting in Delhi working on Orissa Ikat, or